I recorded this episode with Hugh a while ago, and I have been so excited to release this because in this episode, Hugh talks about building a tuition business. No, let me start that again. It's not a tuition business, an education business that is truly scalable, that he has been able to extract himself from while still being the face of the brand. And here's my favorite thing about this. He really breaks things down in a way that's easy to understand. It doesn't, although he's achieved something pretty big, it doesn't seem intimidating. And that's what I really, really love about this episode. Normally, when I record with guests, well, when I record on my own as well, I make plenty of mistakes. But normally, when I record with guests, I might edit a few things here and there. I don't go heavy with editing. But with Hugh's episode, I just left it as it was. I didn't do any editing because everything that he shared is so valuable. So I'm really pleased to share this with you this week. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host, Sumantha, and I'm so pleased you're here. As an education business owner myself and a former teacher, I understand the nuances that only apply to us. So in this podcast, I share fluff-free, tailored and actionable ideas that you can mould to suit your needs. If you'd like to take this conversation further, please do reach out. I would love to meet you. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. That way, you'll be helping me help more people. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy. So welcome, Hugh. Thanks for being on the podcast. Now, I wanted to start with where you're at right now, because I think your journey has been really interesting because you don't actually come from an education background and professionally as such, but you're making such a huge impact in the world of education through your tuition company, your online school. So before we dive into your journey and talk about lessons learned, I think it'd be really useful for our listeners to understand what you do right now.
Sure. Thank you for having me, firstly. Great to be here. So I'm currently the CEO and founder of Minerva Virtual Academy, which is an online school offering the British curriculum to students in the UK mostly, but also in about 60 countries around the world. And yeah, we were a secondary school with students in year 7 to year 13 or age 11 to 18. And currently the fastest growing school in the UK, which is really exciting on the one hand and stressful on the other.
But in addition to the online school, you also have a tuition company you mentioned, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm the founder of Minerva Tutors, but I no longer run it. I took a step back from Minerva Tutors about 3.5 years ago, 3 years ago, to focus solely on the school, Minerva Virtual Academy, and Minerva Tutors, which is, my first baby, is run by someone else. And yeah, it's entering its 6th year now, and which is pretty exciting. I founded it back in 2014.
Amazing. So just thinking of your background, like you're doing so much in the education space, and I'm going to come on to, how did you take that step back from the tuition business so it's still running and sort of mindset and entrepreneurial lessons. But before we do, would you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to enter education? Why education?
Sure. Like many tutors, I was in the arts. I was a wannabe musician, a wannabe rock star, and I didn't make any money from my art. Like many actors, musicians, artists, I tutored to make cash on the side. And I found really early on that, unlike many who definitely see it as just a way to make money while they pursue their main and real passion, I was slightly different. I loved tutoring. I really thought it brought out the best in me. I realized I was quite good at it. I realized that how powerful it can be, transforming a child's life or education journey. And I liked it so much that I was able to quit music, which I did love at the time, but made no money from. And it was very easy for me in the end to give up on my music dream because I love tutoring so much. I was able to switch and go, hang on, I want to build a career out of tuition one-on-one.
Yeah. Yeah, we have something sort of in common. So I didn't know that about you. When we had a chat before, you just mentioned that, you come from this entrepreneurial background, and I suppose you come from more of an education background than I realized. But I'm also a musician. But
Oh,
yeah, but not in terms of wanting to be a rock star as such. I sing other people's songs. But a lot of my friends who are musicians, they also part of their livelihood is teaching, because you kind of have to do that to supplement your income,
exactly.
basically. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Okay, so you don't run that tuition agency anymore. You said you stepped away about 3 years ago. What kind of things did you put in place to confidently be able to do that? Because, that's a great way of sort of future proofing, of creating an asset in your life, right? So how did you do that?
Yeah, but it's hard. So after, you know, the music journey, after uh, sort of becoming a tutor for a couple of years. So I guess it's still entrepreneurial because if you're trying to be a musician, you're essentially running a business. And I actually say nowadays, my first business wasn't Minerva Tutors. My first business was my band, because we ran it like a business, just not very well. And well, I mean, we were good, but not good enough, you know. And so once I went on the tutoring journey with Minerva Tutors, before I founded the business, I tutored for one year. I think I lasted, and I thought, hang on, as a tutor, I can only impact 15 kids a year, maybe 20 kids a year. You know, if you're doing one-on-one. And I thought, well, um, I want more than that. How can I get more than that? Well, by starting a tutoring business. So that's why in 2014 I started a tutoring business, so I could take a step back from tutoring and just run a tutoring agency where I could have multiple tutors delivering my dream of improved high quality tuition. So yeah, I haven't tutored since then, basically, since I launched Minerva Tutors in 2014, and I've just run the tutoring agency. I went straight into being that's the only best way to scale the business is if I do not tutor it, if I just run it. Fast forward 6 years to when I launched my second real business before counting the band, my third business, Minerva Virtual Academy. I knew I wouldn't be able to really maximize the potential of the school unless I took stepped away from the tutoring business. Um, and how was I able to do that? Is the big question. I mean, I did a lot of business. I did a lot of business coaching, received business coaching. Sorry, when I was in my first 6 years of Minerva Tutors. So I love being coached. I'm a real I'm very susceptible to coaching. I'm a really good student, so I sort of I loved being coached. And I had a couple of business coaching groups, business one-on-one business coaches and stuff. And they always said, they hammered into you from day one, like, you don't want to be in the business, you want to be above the business, you want to be on the business. So you need to be building a business that doesn't need you to run. Like that was from day one. And some people will know in our business group, including me, were nowhere near that at the start. But they were like, from day one, that's the sign of a successful business, that it can run without you in it. So for 4 years, I'd been creating a culture where I didn't have to be running the business. And I'll break that down into segments. I think they'll be useful. So at the time, we offered three different services, Minerva Tutors, like many tutoring businesses. After school tuition, so providing tutors to families to top up after school. Homeschooling for families that wanted a full homeschooling service and don't send their children to school. And then the sort of high net worth, ultra high net worth, concierge style tutoring, which some agencies specialize in. Some people go nowhere near, because I don't blame them, because how nightmare the clients can be. And so we were providing those three services. And within 1 year of launching Minerva Tutors, those three services were quite equally spread. Within 1 year, I had someone in charge of after school tuition. So we got to the point where by 2015, 2016, I never spoke to a single client if they called and wanted after school tuition. And I never spoke to a single tutor who was involved with the after school tuition. I had a person in charge of that. Suddenly I'm removing myself from that. My job is just to grow inquiries, and I have someone in charge of after school. 2 years later, but for homeschooling and high net worth, I was still dealing with the homeschool clients and still dealing with the high net worth clients. Okay, 2 years later, so 2018, by 2018, I had someone else in charge of the homeschooling service. So I never spoke to a single homeschooling client of mine anymore, or a single homeschooling tutor. I was removed. I built the system so someone in my business would deal with all homeschooling business. And when I say business, that's the clients and the tutors. So all that was left was I was stuck with the high net worth clients, which yeah, the most take up most of the time, most of your time, but are obviously higher value. So you could argue were worth it. But even then, by sort of 2019, 2020, I was realizing really, then they're not worth my time. I need someone in the business to look after those clients too. One, because they're awful. They WhatsApp you on Sundays and expect you to reply. And two, it's the same theory. How can I grow the business if I'm stuck dealing with these clients on a day-to-day basis? And they take, like I said, high net worth, ultra high net worth tuition, concierge style tuition takes up so much time. So that was the final piece of the puzzle on the 6-year journey was, can I get someone, hire someone to deal with those customers? And once I sorted that, I really was removed from the business and was able to hand over, come 2021, the running of the entire business to one of the people that was in charge of those 3 services. So I'd already been doing that as I went along, because my mentality from day one is the only way Minerva Tutors can, I think, be a success is if I'm not involved in the running of it. And that's how I staggered it, basically.
I love that. Thank you for breaking it down. I had a question where I remember hearing this talk by someone, and they were saying that when you recruit someone, don't ever expect anyone to be as excited and passionate about your business as you are. You can't expect that. So where you were saying, say with the ultra high net worth clientele, where they might message on a Sunday and stuff like that, how did you confidently find people who are going to take over those different areas of your business, who firstly would be okay with dealing with a lot of that, but also where you felt safe? Because if one of them leaves, well, you kind of need to step in potentially, or if there's a problem, then you need to step in. How did you tackle that?
Being brave enough to lose business was like the key to anything, key to success, well, key to the scaling that I was able to do, staff scaling, delegation. So being comfortable with losing business with all those 3 areas. When I first handed over after school tuition to the running of someone else that wasn't me, knowing that she might lose 20% of the business because she's not as good as me, not as confident as me, not as liked as me, I just had to get comfortable with that, because I knew in 6 months to a year's time, it would be running well without me. And that is better than running excellently with me. It is, because I need to be focusing on other areas of business. The same applied for someone running the homeschooling services. And then, yeah, when it came to the high net worth, it's even more interesting than that, than what your point. We stopped doing. The person I hired to run Minerva Tutors didn't feel comfortable dealing with high net worth and ultra high net worths. So instead of me carrying on helping them and being that person that served them, we stopped that service. We just said we're not helping high net worths anymore. We're not helping the ultra high net worth. We're losing that arm of the business. We were able to, because our homeschooling was really growing and our after school was really growing, and my leader was not comfortable dealing with that kind of client. So I said, even more bravely, cool, we'll just stop servicing them then. They're more pain than they are good. And then, funnily enough, a year ago, when we got a new leader join the business, and she was very experienced with dealing with high net worth individuals and very, very comfortable dealing with high net worth individuals. And so I said, cool, well, let's bring that service back. And guess what? She's done well. We've got that service back because she's comfortable dealing with those individuals. So I was able to kind of bring it back in because I had someone in a leadership position that can handle that level of client. And it's worked really well. So I think the biggest lesson was the way I decided, well, we're just going to stop. If I don't have anyone run in the business, and we've got enough business elsewhere, of course, we're making money in the other areas. I said, yeah, cool, we'll stop servicing them. Which
Yeah,
again was brave.
very brave. In fact, I've made a note because that's something I want to come back to. There's a little bit of a trend here where you've got this confidence to take these courageous leaps of faith. something that you mentioned, I mean, you've been doing this for a really long time, you know. I set up my first business in 2014, I think similar time to you.
Mm, mm, mm.
And I remember at the time, I mean, I didn't know anything about marketing. And I remember getting clients to the Yellow Pages. Do you remember the Yellow
Wow,
Pages?
cool.
Which then turned into Yale.com. You've been around for a really long time in the tuition space, longer than me. I wonder whether you would tell us a little bit about how you've ridden that wave of the
Mm.
change of the marketing landscape, how everything has changed. And, you know, in the early days, how did you said your job was to get those clients. How has that changed from 2014 to how you're doing it, or how your team, I should say, are doing it now?
Really good question. So between 2014 and 2018, 2019, so the first 5 years, we were masters of Google PPC. That is it. We were really good at Google PPC, pay per click, and then that was from the get-go, from 2014 to 2019. Really good at Google PPC. And in that time, roughly 2016, 2017, got better at SEO because everyone knows Google SEO takes time anyway. So suddenly by year five, we were brilliant at Google, both pay per click and SEO. Um, and the story of that is when I started out in 2014 in my co-working space, there was a Google ad agency in the corner, four lads. And I said, guys, I've just spent £400 on Google ads of my money and got 4 phone calls. And they said, give us £400 and we'll get you 20 phone calls. And they did. So I just started using them and we got very good at PPC early on and then grew it and grew it and grew it. And obviously that's up to 2019, right? And then our SEO was good because a good quality website, you know, and we became number one on Google for homeschooling through good SEO practices. We obviously marketed in other ways, but just being honest, for a takeaway, that was what we were good at, and that is how I grew Minerva Tutors. Obviously, it changes 2019
Yeah.
onwards, not just because COVID comes along and because 1,000 other tutoring agencies by this point have entered the market. You know, PPC becomes ridiculously competitive, SEO becomes competitive, and we've been going through post-COVID periods of adjustment with how to market sensibly and how to not get caught in a rat race with these guys like with the VC-backed tutor job board guys spending tens of thousands on Google ads, and we're not going to get caught up in that rat race. So, in interestingly, a lot of our stuff now is word of mouth, which is really cool, obviously, because it wasn't. But we've gone from sort of 20% of our leads being word of mouth 5 years ago to 80% of our leads being word of mouth, and we've grown. Now, that's not to say we don't have big ambitions with Minerva Tutors, the tutoring agency. From this summer onwards, you'll see a lot more stuff from us. We've been slightly dormant, if I must say, a bit like we've been ticking over nicely since I handed over the reins, which is great. You know, the business has run, but it hasn't, and it's grown very steadily without me. But that's about to change. We're going to ramp some stuff up, which is interesting. But if you genuinely want to add a bit more in terms of marketing tips, with the school 4 years ago, we entered because they're really good at Google and PPC with tutoring. We went straight in and launched the school off the back of PPC, and we grew to like 200 students at the school, you know, and 75% was from Google. Online school keywords, GCSE online school. So that's less so now. We're really good we're much better with the school with paid social, so paid meta ads. But that involves more like money, good budgets, and good creative. And then there's other areas we've grown the online school, but the tutoring business, the first 5 years was just Google. That was our strategy. So I'm fascinated when you talk about Yellow Pages and Yale. I mean, we were just Google, Google, Google. You know, that was it.
I mean, I came across that a lot later in 2014. I'd just come out of university, and that was my first business. And I didn't know the B of business. You know, I didn't know
Mm.
anything. So I Googled, I didn't know that SEO was a thing. I'd never heard of it.
Mm,
And that's why I was like, well, where should I sign up? Okay, Yellow Pages is coming up. Let me just sign up to that. And weirdly, I thought no one uses Yellow Pages, but over 20 years later, I still get inquiries through the Yellow Pages. People are still using Yell.com apparently.
amazing.
Yeah, it is. But later on, I then discovered things like Google and Google Ads and all these different ways. So your track has been very much down the paid ads route. My track has been more organic.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's a right and a wrong, but something I really love about what you said, the way you spoke actually, is your numbers.
Oh yeah, always.
You
Yeah,
know your numbers.
yeah, yeah.
It seems very obvious to you because you're a really seasoned business owner, and this was not your first business. You tried it with the music. You probably
Mm,
learned so much with the band.
definitely.
But I think the importance of knowing your numbers, and I was talking this morning, just about it this morning in the Tutors Mastermind, is that you have something tangible to make decisions based on.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you were saying, I think 80% was coming
Mm-hmm.
through, no, 75% for the school was coming through Google Ads.
Mm.
Well, because you
It
knew that,
was.
you need to carry on through that.
Mm-hmm.
You knew it was working. And I think sometimes we go by feelings. Oh, this LinkedIn's really great for me. But actually, when you look at numbers, it
Mm.
could be that a different method is good for you. So I wanted to just shine a light on that because the way you spoke about it was so professional, but from a perspective that's so important as a business owner. Even if you're a solopreneur, if you're a sole
Mm.
trader, individual tutor, you still need to know where things are coming from and what's working.
I could tell you um, right now, uh, take 2024, the year, January to December. This is for the school, so for MVA, the second business. Um, I could also tell you it for the tutoring business, but with MVA with the school, I could tell you 2024 out of the, let's say, 4,000 inquiries we got and the 800 enrollments, roughly speaking. So 3,500 inquiries, 800 enrollments. I can tell the exact percentage breakdown of those 3,500 inquiries where they came from. Google PPC, Google Organic, Meta Organic, Meta Paid, paid partnerships, press. I've got those numbers in my head.
Yeah.
I see the pie diagram right now, and I know it from what Q1 2025 is, and I know the comparable.
Yeah.
And if I don't have them like this week's off by heart, but I've got, we're making them. So if I ask someone, I can get them like that because I'm looking at them on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's really, really valuable. It's valuable that you are also thinking in quarters because I think
mm.
when you're in education, it's really easy to think of it as the academic year.
I know, and actually, my principal, she understandably plans her year in the school year way, which is fair. But we've always run MVA from day one, and MT Minerva Tutors since MVA was launched because we've kind of got these best practices now in the annual year, January to December, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And just on that note, I just said I could tell you exactly a breakdown of the 3,500 inquiries, right? It's a rough number, and of the 800 enrollments, and which channel and the conversion percentage of each channel. So we know that Google converts at, let's say, 10%, or Meta converts at 15%. So that's really important too, obviously, based on, it's no good having one channel give you loads of inquiries if you can't convert them,
Yeah,
etc. So
yeah.
yeah, those numbers are at my fingertips.
So
And
important.
it's really, really important.
It's so important. You can't make solid decisions. It doesn't matter how good your coach is if you're working with a coach.
Yeah,
You and your coach can't come up with an excellent strategy if you don't have any data or if you're
yeah.
not paying attention to the data. You said something just now, actually, that I really liked. You said, I know can't remember. It will come back to me. Now, something that I feel is this running thread is you're brave. You can take leaps of faith. I probably have a much higher risk profile than and I think it's lowering as time goes on. But something I really want to ask you is with that courage, with that ongoing theme, what was the seed that gave you the idea of setting up an actual school, an online school? And what gave you the courage to go for it? Because, all the other things you've said where you had the courage to hand things over, you had the courage to try things. This one is a big one. You set up a school.
Agreed. So behind me at that point was a tutoring business, 6 years old, respected, um, stable, and most importantly, profitable. So I built a business that made money with a good team. And if the school failed in the first 3, 4 months, well, I've got this great 6 year old tutoring business I built. So it wasn't completely the first idea. And spoiler alert, but what I'm going to get at with these examples is I take these risks with something behind me,
Yeah.
um, which makes them less risky. And so when we launched MBA, there's that behind me. So I wasn't that scared about failure because I had a good business behind me, which had not failed and won't fail if I focus on the school. It was in good shape. So that is why you're able to take a risk. Second is, um, the model itself. So we weren't just radical with the fact we're an online school. Well, that's quite radical. But we operated a brand new learning model that, well, not brand new, but a model that many schools do not employ, which is flipped learning. So 60% of the learning is done asynchronously without a teacher, and 40% is done synchronously. That was risky, but you know, that paid off massively. You know, our model is what's managed to help us beat the competition in the last 4 years. The fact that there's that asynchronous synchronous combination, plus every child gets a mentor once a week, one-on-one, which obviously comes from my tutoring background. Plus we were going to have an online school which had a community, so assemblies on Monday morning, after school clubs, in-person meetups, which have grown from 1 a year to 6 a term. Like, that model was the risky part. I knew setting up an online school was quite risky, but the demand was there. I could see it. There was demand for affordable homeschooling. And in many ways, my online school that I set up was to feed the demand for affordable homeschooling. What's affordable homeschooling? Well, for me, that's an online school. That's how I thought about it. So I knew there'd be inquiries, but would they like the model because it was different to other online schools? That was risky, but I backed it because I believed in it. That was like the riskiest part, but I believed in it. I really believed in it. But the actual launching of an online school, firstly, I had Minerva Tutors behind me, so I felt confident. If it all went wrong, I've got to fall back on my first business. And secondly, I knew there was a market for online school, affordable home education solution, because I could see the market with my own eyes. I could see the demand in 2020. Our phone would not stop ringing at Minerva Tutors for homeschooling. And every family realized they couldn't afford to homeschool with tutors because it's 30 grand, 20 grand if you're lucky. You know, it's expensive. But the phone would not stop ringing in 2020. So I knew the demand was there. So set up a form of online school. Again, wasn't that risky for me. The riskier part was the model, but I believed in that fundamentally. So that's why I was able to take these like calculated leaps of faith.
Yeah. Where did the idea come from? What planted that seed? So you're running this tuition business,
Fair
tutoring
play.
business. Yeah.
I'll extrapolate more on what I mentioned a second ago because that's crucial to that answer, the answering of that question. So, Minerva Tutors, before COVID, homeschooling had been growing for us and other areas. Like the demand for homeschooling with tutors was just growing, and this is pre-COVID. And then, because obviously people were seeking an alternative form of schooling. Schooling is not fit for purpose for many students. Modern schooling does not suit many students. And then in COVID, that exploded because parents saw for the first time. Sorry, most parents had a miserable time, and that most children had a miserable time in lockdown. But many families, a significant minority, saw their child happy for the first time in years. Because for so many children, traditional school doesn't suit them at best. And then maybe for some kids, traditional school makes them sad, which is awful. And then for some kids, traditional school makes them ill. And parents don't know what to do. They're just sending them there every day, just putting their hair out and knowing this isn't right for their child. So COVID comes along, and all these children were suddenly happy again. And not happy because they're bunking school, happy because they were going to school and engaging in a better way. They were going to school online, which suddenly it turns out was better for them. So all these parents up and down the country had this awakening where their child was happy for the first time in years. So they Google homeschooling because they're not sending them back because they think, God, this is it. My child learning from home, they're happier. Guess what? They engage more. Guess what? They learn more because of that. They're Googling homeschooling. We pop up, like as I go back to the Google SEO story. Minerva Tutors pops up. They call us, say, this looks amazing. I want to homeschool my kid. How much does it cost? And we'd quote them. And it's expensive, homeschooling with tutors. And they'd be like, oh, right. And that was 95% of my phone calls. So if I could turn that, we could turn that 95% into 50, that's a bunch of customers there. So how do I give them something they can afford that's good? And for me, that was an online school called Minerva Virtual Academy. So unlike a lot of online schools, we came at it from homeschooling and experience with tutoring and, I guess, entrepreneur-led, whereas other online schools have been formed by schools going online or school teachers creating an online school, which is great. There's some other good ones, but we came at it from the home ed world, homeschooling services, homeschooling as a business, and trying to create a really cool homeschooling, affordable homeschooling product, which for me, in the end, was Minerva's Virtual Academy. What made it cool, when I say cool, is it would be an online school with a community, so a real sense of school.
Love it. One thing that I think is really coming out is that one of the keys to your success in these decisions is that you're responsive. So when I asked you about the ultra high net worth, how do you, put someone in place? You were like, I stopped it. You responded to the situation. When you set up the online school, it wasn't this, lightning bolt of inspiration. And it was a response to the fact that I can't serve these people because this isn't fit for purpose for what they need, or not necessarily purpose. It just wasn't aligning. So how do I respond to that? And so actually, I think that what's a really good takeaway is that, you see, when I met you, I in my head, the word that came into play was innovation, was innovative. And I still think you are. However, a dimension to that is that you weren't innovative in a kind of risky way. You weren't like, I'm going to bring this to the market, I'm going to change the world. You're like, I'm going to change the world based on something I know with evidence there's a demand for. And you supplied that demand, which is really, it sounds simple, but it's really wise. You didn't make assumptions.
No, completely. And everything I do now is data-led. And every decision I make has to be data-led now, even more so in 2025. Like it's been amazing with the second business because all the things I didn't do enough with my first business, I'm doing with the second business. And 100% the reason we launched was based off evidence and data, which again, de-risks obviously.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's innovative in one way. Yeah, definitely. But not enough people pick up on it when they're speaking to me about that. It's actually just evidence-based decisions, and therefore, but ultimately making decisions. I guess taking the leap to do that, but based on 100%. And when you're an entrepreneur in your first few years, you don't do enough of that at all. You do so much gut instinct stuff, which is still so important. I promise, gut and instinct is really important, but that's often in like HR related human stuff. That's when gut is still so important. You've got to have data and gut, but a lot of the time you've got to just rely on facts and evidence. Otherwise, you could be creating the coolest sounding product in the world, but if no one's going to buy it, what's the point? And the other lesson learned, which was great, so starting the second business from scratch almost, doing the things that I didn't do enough of, and all the lessons learned from the tutoring business was, and this is a beautiful nugget, from day one with the school, I set up the structures and the teams so I never would speak to a parent ever, and I would never speak to a teacher ever. I had someone else in charge of the teachers, someone else in charge of looking after parents, and someone else in charge of recruiting parents, and students. So from day one, my phone was never going to be disturbed or email inbox be disturbed by a customer or a staff member, faculty staff member. I did focus on the non-faculty, so sales, marketing, operations, finance. And that doesn't mean I ignored customers who had a problem or ignore. No, no, no. If it was a problem, it came to me eventually, etc. Or if it was a good news, it would come to me eventually. But you just setting your business up from day one, where you are not being distracted by your customers and your staff, interestingly, but you're always there. You can listen and find out what's going on and what's not, because you've got senior people reporting to you. That was a revelation.
Yeah.
That was an absolute revelation, because then I could just focus on the strategy of growing the business. In fact, I could do more to help my customers. I could do more to help my staff because I wasn't speaking to them
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis. And that has been a real key. If we're talking about the business side of this, I often get talked about school and the innovation, but what I love this conversation is drilling into business side. And that has been one of the keys to the success of the business. Is in the four and a bit years we've been going, like from day one, I was removed from customers and staff, teaching staff, but yeah, not non-teaching staff, but that's a smaller team.
Something that you touched on, but I just want to dive into a little bit more, is when you were saying that from day one with the academy, you stepped back. But you said that doesn't mean that, I ignore customers and I ignore teachers. Someone listening to this who's very early on in their career and they're thinking, this sounds cool, actually. I'd like to build something that doesn't need me. I know that the fear that would kick in is, yeah, but aren't I my brand? Like I'm front and center. And also, but then how do I make parents okay with that? If I'm representing my business, how do I make them feel all right without meeting me? And that kind of human, that personal relationship element. I think you do both beautifully, but could you talk to us a little bit about how you've done that?
Yeah, when you say it like that, it's like, yeah, I should write a blog on this, because it's complicated.
Yeah.
And I'm working out how to answer you best, because it's such a good question and so important. And I don't want people to think, but what? You haven't explained that well. I don't get it. So let's try and give some context. With my tutoring business, I was obviously stuck from day one. I did not do this. From day one, I was in charge of the tutors, looking after the tutors, and in charge of speaking to all the clients, right? Now, that's what everyone gets stuck there. It's true. And I explained earlier how I slowly managed to hand that over. How did I do that with MVA? Again, obviously you need some, I had some money up front, which my tutoring business loaned. So I was able from day one to have some staff, okay? Obviously, we had 4 members of staff. So I could have the head teacher. So then, okay, so that's to be fair, that's to be really honest. Obviously, it's really hard to do what I'm describing if you're starting with £0, but many people shouldn't be starting their business with £0, but they should be some savings they've saved up, or they should be getting investment. And I, as I said, I had a £50,000 loan from my tutoring business. That's what kicked me off with the school. So, but with that 50, what did I do? Have a headmaster, head teacher. So they were going to be in charge of all the students and the parents, and they're called head teacher. Guess what? Most parents don't want to speak to the CEO. Who's that? They want to speak to the head teacher. So that's how I solved that one. And on the growth side, we had a head of admissions and head of marketing who would deal with all inbound inquiries. And parents coming to a school, they didn't ever think, oh, I need to speak to the CEO. They want to deal with the head of admissions. So labeling those people correctly from day one is what helped create this culture where I don't need to be involved. So it's the right staff, sure, but also the right labels, the right, like some people like, why weren't you the headmaster, head teacher? Almost people thought I wanted to be the head teacher. I should call myself the head teacher. It's like, no, let's get a real head teacher with a real head teacher background. Let's do that. And so the right staff, then labeling them correctly in those roles, I was able to day one be that removed. And that required a bit of funding, but like I said, I had £50,000 of startup capital, and which was a loan from the business. And I'm not saying everyone's in that privileged position, but I'm just saying that's a good example. So that was the way to do it. And the tricky question, though, was how, if I'm the brand, how do you detach yourself in that way? And that's a really good one because we do it really well. I mean, I obviously am. Well, firstly, I think one is able, as I've shown, but we didn't know this was possible, to be the face of the brand on LinkedIn, without parents expecting to speak to me because of that same thing I just described when we had 4 kids at the start. They always have a head teacher to speak to or a head of admissions to speak to if they're coming in. So they should only really speak to the CEO if there's something major that must be escalated, I guess, or which thankfully has happened. Like, I've had one complaint in 4 years or something, like, which is amazing, and
Yeah.
through our complaints procedure. Because guess what, you put in a complaints procedure, and that's how it gets to the CEO. They have to file a complaint, and it's escalated, and rightly, and it should be, and I should address it. But so, and that is why on LinkedIn you can do a lot of personal branding stuff, which is about me and growing my online school, with parents still not expecting to have to speak to me. And I'll show you that working in action. On my LinkedIn posts, existing parents engage with my posts all the time. They say, thank you for saving my child's life, that this has been amazing, I've got my daughter back. They're happy to publicly share that. But they're not coming to me about the maths curriculum, because they shouldn't. They're not coming to me about parents' evening, because they shouldn't. And they kind of know that. So somehow, with the correct labeling,
Yeah.
we've created a culture where this perfect situation, I say, exists. Now, but then flip. I think if you want to talk about marketing and brand, and to make a final point on this, you go to the Instagram accounts of the company and the Facebook and the TikTok. You might see me occasionally, but I'm not the face of MVA at all. The face of MVA is our students. The face of MVA is our teachers. The face of MVA is our parents sometimes. And I might pop up now and again, and we have a separate company strategy for our social media, which it doesn't involve Hugh. We have a LinkedIn personal brand strategy, which is mine. We also have an Instagram personal brand strategy, which is mine, sure. But very consciously from day one, the MVA marketing might have me pop up now and again, but it is not about me. It is about our kids, about our parents, and about our teachers and senior leaders. And that, I think, is why it's all seemed to work. So there's a really good question, and I hope I managed to
You have.
articulate that
You have. I really like it.
answer.
I think something I really like is that you gave different examples of different platforms. And something that's important is this slight shift when you think of strategy is a lot of people think of content strategy. They're like, what shall I post on a Monday? And what shall I
Mm-hmm.
post on a when? What you're focused on is actually more important, and that is a platform strategy.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn is the home of this. Instagram, or this Instagram account, is the home of that. That's actually what should steer the content strategy,
Mm-hmm.
not the other way around. And you've been really intentional about that, which I think is the real key. Now we're coming to a sort of end, like I say, sort of, because we've still got a little bit of time. And I really love speaking to you about all of this. Um, Something I want to ask you is I've spoken to quite a few tuition business owners, and some of them who've been going for a while have said that if I was advising someone now, and even if I were to do it again, I wouldn't have hired tutors. Now, they've given different reasons, but I don't want to bring them into the conversation purely because I don't want to kind of sway, or I don't want to add something, a layer that doesn't need to be there. But I would love to know your experience and your opinion. If you were to do it again, is that how you would do it? If you were setting up Minerva Tutors right now in 2025, would you hire tutors? What's your take on that?
Um, Now, could I clarify the question? When you say would I hire tutors, as opposed to what? If you're offering a tutoring business, what you mean certain individual bad tutors? No, what do you mean by
No,
would
sorry.
you hire
That they
tutors?
wouldn't have followed that particular model to kind of future proof, if you like. They
Mm,
would have maybe gone down different routes, like offering courses or whatever else, but they wouldn't have perhaps actually gone down the tuition business model,
mm. Yeah, oh, they might have just done something else, like
done
in
something else.
education.
Yeah,
Yeah,
within the
yeah, yeah. I
tutoring
mean, great,
world.
interesting point. Yeah, it's because fundamentally, you could argue the tutoring agency model is a bad business model. You could. You rely, on the whole, on freelance tutors. So you're not employed by them. So on the one side, they're not loyal to you necessarily, and on the other side, you're not that loyal to them because you're not employing them. So that's a not very great relationship recipe for a strong business. You rely on these freelance tutors who can work for other agencies too. Cool. So how's that representing your brand? If like one day they're with this and one day they're with them, but they're your foot soldiers, and what on Tuesday they don't give a about you that because they're working for your competitor. So that's just a weird problem the tutoring agency model has. And further to that, tutors on the whole, they don't want to be tutors full time. They love it. Some of them don't. It's a means to an end. And there's so many tutors are just tutoring because they deep down want to be musicians and actors and everything else. So you're dealing with for your brand and your product and this amazing thing you're trying to create. People that are actually treating it as a part-time job that isn't their career. Now, these things were true 11 years ago. They were way more true than they are now. All those things have got better, sure. But that's why I started Minerva Tutors, because I saw those things. Tutoring was unprofessional. It was kind of a grey area, It was cash in hand. It was like you got no training back then. You could call yourself an 11 plus tutor and you'd never taught the 11 plus in your life. And you were sent to do an 11 plus job by your tutoring agency. So this was a huge problem 11 years ago. We formed to try to fight that. I wanted to have tutors who their full-time job was tutoring, right? Not part-time. That was my dream. I wanted to have a tutoring agency that provided training and qualifications. And we built our own training program, but qualifications are way off. And those as you see with the industry over the last 7 years, a lot of these things have got so much better. They're so much more professional.
Yeah.
The Tutors Association does a great job. The things I wanted to change 11 years ago, turns out lots of other people wanted to change it too. And we think we all collectively have. But fundamentally, unless you're one of the two of the other agencies who have employed tutors on the payroll, the model is still flawed for those reasons. And if I was to do it again, I would work out a way from day one to have your tutors on salaries, in salary positions on the payroll, with guaranteed hours somehow, and a professional like model where you could train them. They could go like much more like teachers, because that creates the loyalty, that creates the brand recognition, that creates you looking after them and them looking after you, and it ultimately creates professionalism. And there's some guys that have done this very well, and we did it and it worked really well, but it's expensive. It's so expensive. And if I was really being honest, brutally honest, if I'd start again, I'd want to create that model properly, because I believe in tutoring. I wouldn't, and one-on-one tuition, I would not scrap that if I did it all again. I would just want to create a model with more thought, more time, perhaps more investment, where our tutors, we could grow our company and our tutors on salaries on the payroll. But a lot of tutors out there don't want that either. So this is the mess we're all in. And don't get me wrong, there's been amazing changes. I just want to make that clear to the industry. There really has. A tutors association is a big part of that. But I still think we face the same problems as we did 11 years ago. They're just not as extreme. What do you think to that? That's one thing I'm going to go put back on you and say, what do you think of everything I just said? I don't mind what you think of everything else I said there in the call. What do you think of everything I just said there?
I think you're spot on in terms of the flawed and I wouldn't say a flawed model of the challenges, because a lot of people I'm meeting are people who are like, well, I'm seeing, this agency that I'm working for and I really want to go at it alone. And I think there's an added layer here now where people want to run their own businesses and they're using agencies as stepping stone. And I think that getting that loyalty, getting that stability, rather than a parent having 5 different tutors in 1 year is really hard. And actually, there's a recruitment piece on that. Having a great recruitment process is really important. So, if you're going to transition to that, then that's you got to pay attention to stuff like that, and retention and training and development and, all of those things. I'm still very on the fence about whether it's a good thing to do now or not a good thing to do now. I'm very on the fence because when I explored it in my business, I was a bit like, oh, it's a numbers game, though. I mean, I have to just get the numbers in order to make this make sense financially. And that put me off, and but I have a second business, tuition is I'm an independent tutor. It's not a business I'm growing. I'm not saying I won't grow it later.
Mm,
So yeah, I'm really on the fence. I hate being on the fence, but I am because I can understand both sides to it. But I think you gave a really great answer because what I like about it is you're coming from a position of experience. I'm not.
mm.
I haven't hired tutors, so I'm coming from a theoretical and research-based position. You're speaking on experience and you've been really honest. And I like that I made a note actually. Something I really love about your entire story is you haven't said, here is the silver bullet, like rags to riches in 24 hours. I sneezed and I made millions. You've given us something actually really inspirational, really doable, really realistic. You've been honest, you've broken it down, and you've gone for that kind of steady business growth. And you've said, you know what? Yeah, I set up this school and that sounds really impressive. But guess what? I had investment from a previous business and experience. So I didn't have to learn Google Ads. I went straight in with it. And all of that doesn't make it any less inspirational, but it also makes it really accessible, which is what I really, really like about how you've told your story, but about your story in general.
And I think the biggest lesson from that summary, if we were to bite size it, and you haven't asked me to, but it just came out when you said that, all of that was, um, if you're running a business and you're doing well, it's doing okay, but it's perhaps not doing what you want, which is the most common. It's not as big as you hoped or profitable as you hoped, whatever. Think about starting a second business, which you could get perfect from day one and or right from day one, not perfect. And I'm not saying that's easy. I'm just saying if you've got ambitions and aspirations of to be a certain type of entrepreneur, to have a certain measure of success, um, as an entrepreneur, you don't think the business you're currently doing has to be the one.
Yeah.
And if you can create a way for that business, especially if it's doing okay, to keep going and doing well, because I mean, if it's not doing well, maybe you should be cutting it. But if it is doing okay and is doing reasonably well, but it is struggling to get to the heights you want it to, there's maybe a second business which could actually get you to those heights. Which and I think most importantly in my journey is they're similar, they're complementary, they're sister businesses for sure. Um, and I'm not saying what I just said is easy or is the route for everyone running a small business. I'm not, but I'm saying there'll be people out there that might, flick a switch. Can you create a complementary business which is new, and both of them can exist, exist side by side? And I'd recommend it be a brand new business because it's important they're separated, for lots of reasons. And that's like I said, I repeat, it's not easy for everyone and doesn't make sense for loads of people. But for some, that might be a really, really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah.
And that's certainly what dawned on me in the summer of 2020. Hang on, is this business the one? And if I've got this idea and they could complement each other and I could go for it if I have this in place and this in place. And I'm pretty certain the market's there based off data.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got one last question because I'm very aware that you've given me an hour of your time and I'm sure you're busy. I want just one last question, and that is that I have recently seen, I have a lot of independent tutors in my network, and I've recently seen people convey that they don't love this idea of building and growing and scaling. And you've been very clear. You've said this isn't for everyone, but if you have got those ambitions, then this is the way to go about it. So you're not coming from a pressurized or a one size fits all angle. I know you're not. But there are a lot of people who are like, but I really like tutoring, so I want to just carry on tutoring. I'd really love to know your opinion that if you really love tutoring and you want to be on the ground, but you also want some kind of plan for the future, is there another way, in your opinion? And is it something, I think I know the answer to the second part. Is it something you must do, you should do? Is it, wise? Or could you just tutor until retirement and stop? What's your take on if someone said to you, yeah, but I don't want to do any of that, Hugh. I love teaching, but I still want a plan for the future. I still want to be making money somehow through this when I'm older, for example.
Yeah, I mean that's the hard thing because tutors can price themselves out. Like you see it, right? The best tutors we've got are Minerva tutors, and they say they're now paid like 70 an hour, something like that. When they started, they were paid 40. If they if we want to promote them inverted commas because they're the best and they've been with us for a long time, but we can't offer them 80 because there'll be no customers for them. So you can't get promoted because of this path you've chosen. You've chosen to be an independent freelance tutor where you're a slave to the market and you don't work for the company, you're a freelance agent. I'm talking about both sides now, aren't I? Both being the agent and being the tutor. And it's a problem. So this is a ceiling. I know some amazing independent tutors who do a bit of work for us because they can occasionally get the really high rate, but they can't with us, so they have to get their really high rate all the time because there's not enough work. So they've got to work for 5 different agencies and be independent. And they built themselves a reasonably decent living, but they could have a bad autumn where they lose 2 clients and bang, it's gone. So it's nothing wrong with wanting to tutor forever and not grow a business. Nothing wrong with that. You must do what you love and must do what makes you happy. But if you're thinking about security, which many of us do, I think you've got to think about ways of securing your income. And I, as a tutor, I think there's limited options unless you are to innovate and run your own business like you're suggesting, and which is all the right things to do. Or think of ways, again, this is one business way, how can you guarantee income for the year? Can you start creating contracts with your parents so you're not at the whim of them and the mercy of them cancelling and you losing out on that week income, okay, basic, or not at the whim of them cancelling after 6 months like they could easily do, and then you're losing out on 6 months worth of income? Can you think of ways to lock yourself in for annual contracts or at least termly contracts if you were to go down this route, this on your own route? Ways to protect yourself. I think a final point might be, if that's again your route, look for inspiration around the world. Look at the crazy market of like Hong Kong, where tutors are celebrities. And how do they do that? They deliver their lessons online at scale to like hundreds of thousands of kids. But then if this is someone that loves tutoring, they might be like, well, I don't want that. I want the one-on-one personal impact. And if that's again the point, that's a wonderful thing. But I think you struggle in this industry unless you innovate, start your own business, and think about things differently. You're going to struggle to give yourself security until retirement with tutoring as a freelance independent, because unless you get things in place like contracts and the support of maybe an agent by locking them in on a contract or whatever, and unless you innovate, if you are just going to stick to it, you're always at the mercy of
Yeah.
parents or clients, let's say, who with pretty flimsy contracts can do what they want. So I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be a downer. I think there's so much opportunity,
Yeah.
and I'm really not trying to be a downer on it as a career. I know many career tutors in their 40s now who've been doing it since their 20s. So that's like they've been doing 2 decades worth of this stuff. It does work. There's some fantastic examples of it out there. I'm friends with at least 3 independent tutors, but there's gets this threshold with your price point when you can't
Yeah.
really get promoted. I mean, you can, and you might land a gig with a high net worth client, but it's just there's not enough security, being realistic, for unless for you to not have to hustle every year.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And actually, the thing I really want to finish on here is something you've really proved is that you can have a heart-led business that is profitable, safe for the future, that is where you're thinking through an entrepreneurial lens. You can actually you can tick all of those boxes, because I think that a lot of the time, the fear that comes from making these very businessy decisions and taking a very entrepreneurial approach is that, oh, but then I'm losing the thing I love. And what you've proved to me is that your businesses, they are still heart-led. You
Mm.
know them inside and out. Just because you're removed from it operationally doesn't mean you don't know them really well. You're very focused on your why. You know the impact you want to make. So it's still heart-led, but you're making decisions based on numbers. You're thinking about your future and your family's future and how you want to live, and all of those things, they can coexist. And I think that that's probably one of the most valuable takeaways I know that a lot of my audience will take from this conversation, because I think that sometimes they don't take those steps, whatever those steps may be, they don't take them out of fear of losing the thing that they love. So thank you so much, Hugh. You've shared so much. Really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we could have carried on for another hour, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed drilling into the business aspects, which I don't often get to do on podcasts, and because that's for me exciting. Don't say more exciting. It is as exciting as the education element, and
Yeah.
it's been great sharing those thoughts, and it's been great diving back into those times where I've made decisions and based off evidence and data, and I think the real lesson is, I've been an entrepreneur for 11 years, and there's different measures of success,
Yeah.
right, as an entrepreneur. And I felt successful in my second year. And the feeling was comparable to how successful I felt last year. So like that's my second year and my 10th year, but the feeling of success was the same, but they were a million miles apart in terms of size of business, profitability, what have you. But it's important that we all measure our success in different ways, depending on our time, but depending on the time of our life we're in, the period of life we're in, sorry, and different areas of our business, which might indicate what success means. And it's a lot, 11 years, I've really only started now to realize what's possible. And so it's a long game.
It's a journey, isn't it? And I think when you love business, when you love entrepreneurship, it's kind of, you can't see the end because you want to carry on and, you're excited by it. Thank you so much, Hugh, for your
My
time,
pleasure.
sharing so many golden nuggets. I hope you can join back soon where, well, maybe in a year's time or something, where you've made even more progress and we
We'll
can
see.
reflect on something like that. You've got some exciting things coming.
I
Thanks
hope
again,
so.
Hugh. Thank
I hope
you.
so. I hope don't see in a year and it's like, oh no, it's all gone wrong. Which I live with every day. I think that could happen every day. So
Yeah.
we'll see. So I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not.
No, I have faith in your approach, and I have full faith that it absolutely won't be in that situation. I've really loved our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would you like to take this discussion further? Perhaps you have some questions or you'd like more ideas on tailoring your business. If so, book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes.